For decades, American wheat wasn't just another agricultural product. It was the benchmark for quality across the globe. Kansas hard red winter and North Dakota spring wheat were the undisputed gold standard, priced on the prestigious Chicago Board of Trade and used to calibrate contracts from Manila to Milan. When international buyers thought of consistency, high protein content, and trusted certifications, they thought of U.S. wheat. But that seemingly unshakable position is now collapsing, and faster than anyone expected. In the summer of 2024, something began to quietly crack beneath the surface of American agricultural dominance. By mid-2025, the global wheat trade had undergone a stunning shift. One by one, buyers across continents began abandoning the U.S. as their wheat supplier of choice. From the bustling ports of the Philippines to the grain terminals of France, from South Korea's precision labs to Mexico's vast milling networks, the contracts were being rewritten, this time in favor of Canada, Australia, and even Argentina. This isn't a story about a price war. This is about trust lost, logistics broken, and an outdated system being exposed for its vulnerabilities. Welcome to the collapse of American wheat. The unraveling of American wheat dominance didn't come with headlines or alarm bells. It came silently, steadily, and without resistance. It began in small procurement rooms, where nervous whispers about rising risk premiums and delayed shipments started replacing the usual confidence in U.S. contracts. In spreadsheets, contracts, and conversations, something was shifting. Global food corporations began hedging quietly, changing routes, and signing fresh agreements elsewhere, just in case. Then the numbers started to reflect the whispers. In the Philippines, long considered one of America's most loyal grain buyers, purchase volumes for U.S. wheat quietly dropped for the first time in nearly a decade. Meanwhile, inquiries for Canadian and Australian wheat surged. In France, a key partner in Europe, a silent exit was underway as millers began diversifying their sources. South Korea and Mexico followed, and by early 2025, it wasn't just an anomaly, it was a trend. And what made it so startling was the fact that price had little to do with it. Kansas wheat prices had slipped just marginally, between $8 and $10 per ton compared to Canadian futures. Yet, over a third of global contracts began moving north or south. There was no logical economic reason. The markets were pointing to something deeper. Trust was eroding, and it was happening faster than Washington or Wall Street expected. What would make traditional, high-volume buyers walk away from a known supplier? Why were millers, logistics heads, and food safety regulators choosing to untangle decades-old supply lines to embrace untested ones? The questions piled up, and the answers led to a grim realization. Confidence in American wheat was slipping, not because it was cheap, but because it was no longer reliable. This wasn't an accident. This was a systemic failure built over years. Three core factors came together to fuel this dramatic collapse: logistical unreliability, outdated certification systems, and escalating political instability. Let's start with logistics. Traditionally, American ports were seen as efficient and reliable. But in 2024 and 2025, things changed. Insurance companies began re-evaluating political risk around U.S. cargo. In the Philippines, for instance, authorities imposed a political delay risk premium on shipments originating from U.S. ports, driving up insurance costs dramatically. Shipping wheat from Seattle suddenly cost around $410 per ton, nearly double the $225 cost from Vancouver. This wasn't due to increased fuel costs or longer distances. It was the risk. Political gridlock, strikes, policy reversals, and customs delays made U.S. shipments unpredictable. Then came the certification problem. The U.S., once seen as a leader in agricultural transparency, had fallen behind on technological upgrades. European buyers flagged inconsistencies in documentation, especially around carbon tracking and sustainability reporting. While the European Union moved towards strict enforcement of the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, the U.S. lagged behind. Chicago and Portland ports lacked digitized protocols that aligned with EU customs systems. On the other hand, Canada developed a fully integrated carbon tracking protocol through QR-coded systems embedded directly into invoices, readable by European customs with a scan. This wasn't just futuristic, it was frictionless, and global buyers took notice. But the most alarming concern was political instability. Over the past 5 years, U.S. politics has become a liability in trade. Government shutdowns, regulatory freezes, executive order reversals, all contributed to an environment where contracts could no longer be considered stable. From Capitol Hill's budget crisis to unpredictable export controls, American agricultural products were no longer seen as immune to domestic chaos. And in the business of feeding nations, unpredictability is a deal breaker. If you're finding this breakdown useful, make sure to subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss these deep dives into global economic shifts. Nowhere was the unraveling more visible than in the Philippines. For 8 consecutive years, San Miguel Foods had depended on U.S. wheat blends to meet their massive production demands, averaging 2.7 million tons annually. But in March 2025, they pulled out of a 110,000-ton renewal option and instead signed with Saskatchewan-based Vetera for 120,000 tons of high-protein wheat and Australia's CBH for 40,000 tons of premium APDO wheat. The reason? A combination of delayed shipments, inflated insurance premiums, and inconsistent certification from U.S. suppliers. Within days of the announcement, the Philippine Customs Authority reclassified U.S. wheat imports, applying an elevated political risk coefficient. American cargo was penalized. Canadian and Australian cargo was not. The insurance discrepancy alone tilted the scales permanently. France presented another rupture in America's wheat legacy. Longtime admirers of American hard red spring wheat, French millers started raising concerns over glyphosate levels and the lack of digital carbon reporting required for compliance with the EU's CBAM program. Imports fell to just 132,000 tons in Q1 2025, the lowest since 2002. Meanwhile, Canadian imports surged past 218,000 tons. Why? France had zero tolerance for bureaucratic friction. Canada's carbon protocol was fully traceable. Buyers could scan a shipment and instantly access documentation. No customs hiccups, no regulatory roadblocks. That reliability, combined with stable glyphosate test results, made Canada the preferred choice. A leaked memo from the French Millers Federation even warned of red line risk in American shipments, highlighting a third consecutive glyphosate warning in U.S. grain. South Korea's pivot was precise and scientific. Their 2025 food safety reform dropped glyphosate residue limits to 30 parts per billion. U.S. wheat regularly tested between 200 and 400 bp. That triggered automatic retesting at ports, delaying imports and damaging supplier confidence. According to USDA figures, 28% of U.S. shipments were flagged at Korean docks. In contrast, Canada's Clean Farm program, supported by drone-guided precision farming from the University of Saskatchewan, achieved over 90% accuracy in reducing residue risks. The result was a near-total reshuffling of supply routes. By May 2025, 62% of Korean wheat imports came from Canada. The U.S. lost $410 million in trade value, and North Dakota's economy bled over 6,000 jobs as a result. Mexico's case was different, but equally damning. Border controls intensified due to immigration pressures and new food safety protocols. Crossings at Mesa and Laredo saw delays stretching 12 to 16 hours, crushing Mexico's just-in-time mill operations. The reliability of delivery collapsed. Canada, meanwhile, activated a seamless rail logistics protocol stretching from Alaska to Baja, California. No customs slowdowns, no delays. By May 2025, Canadian wheat accounted for 38% of Mexican imports, while America's share collapsed from 32% to 17%. These foreign defections quickly translated into a domestic economic storm. By the spring of 2025, Kansas silos were overflowing, with stored inventory rising by 44% year over year. The market became saturated. Spot prices plummeted from $6.92 per bushel down to $6.05, slipping below the $6.10 profitability threshold that kept medium-sized farms in the black. Across the Midwest, farms began cutting operations. laying off seasonal workers, and defaulting on equipment loans. For many, it wasn't just a bad season, it was the end of the line. And it wasn't just the farms that suffered. The ripple effects tore through entire towns. From agricultural co-ops to fertilizer suppliers, from trucking firms to grain elevators, the contraction tightened its grip. Universities with land-grant agriculture programs saw research funding dry up. Local banks reported rising delinquencies. What was once a robust, export-driven engine was now sputtering. The Purdue Food and Agriculture Policy Research Center offered a bleak warning. When a buyer switches grain suppliers, the likelihood of returning within 5 years is less than 15%. If the Philippines, France, Korea, Mexico, and Italy all lock in new long-term contracts, U.S. wheat exports could fall from 26 million to just 16 million tons annually. That means a $19.4 billion hit to regional GDP and a staggering 45,000 jobs lost, not just in agriculture, but in the broader economy built around it. Canada's rise wasn't accidental. Ottawa's Protein Supercluster program, backed by CAD $950 million in strategic grants, gave Canada a blueprint to leap ahead of global competitors. The program brought together farmers, software developers, logistics firms, and policymakers under one roof. The result was a digital wheat supply chain unlike anything else in the world. Each shipment carried a QR code that contained real-time data, protein levels, moisture content, pesticide traces, and carbon scores, instantly accessible, tamper-proof, and audit-ready. The system didn't just work, it gave buyers peace of mind. When the EU launched its carbon compliance protocols, Canada was already ahead. Shipments cleared faster. Customs delays vanished. Documentation wasn't PDF-based or faxed from rural agencies. It was real-time, system-linked, and traceable back to the field. Australia's CBH followed suit, modeling its infrastructure around Canada's traceability model. A Pivo-class wheat from Western Australia became the new standard for Asian noodle manufacturers. Reliable, traceable, and regulation-friendly, this was the new definition of premium. While the U.S. was stuck juggling fragmented federal and state agencies, Canada and Australia were operating as single, streamlined, digital-first ecosystems. That difference was everything. In March 2025, the USDA introduced the Strategic Grain Reliability Act, a sweeping proposal to modernize the nation's wheat supply infrastructure. The plan aimed to digitize certification processes, create a unified IO monitoring system, and provide export guarantees to protect against political volatility. The bill was ambitious. It had vision, but it arrived late and ran into political headwinds. Congressional budget disputes quickly mired the bill in committee debates. Critics questioned the funding size. Lobbyists argued over data access. The legislation, intended to be a lifeline for American wheat, risked becoming another casualty of gridlock. While the U.S. delayed action, futures markets responded with volatility. Traders priced in long-term risk. Foreign buyers raised their premiums or opted out altogether. In short, the very effort to restore confidence was now being undermined by the same political instability that caused the crisis. This isn't just a wheat story. This is a wake-up call. A once unshakable pillar of American trade, trusted across continents and woven into the fabric of global agriculture, has shown cracks too large to ignore. The fall of U.S. wheat from its gold standard pedestal reveals something much deeper than lost contracts or market share. It exposes how fragile dominance becomes when it's propped up by outdated systems, fragmented governance, and the assumption that loyalty will last forever. For decades, the U.S. relied on reputation, not reinvention. But in a world where QR codes are the new customs clearance, and where political risk can add hundreds of dollars per ton to a shipment, reputation alone isn't enough. Buyers today don't just want grain, they want guarantees. They want transparency at every step, and the assurance that what they're promised will arrive on time, on spec, and without bureaucratic chaos. Canada and Australia didn't just offer a better price, they offered peace of mind. They saw the storm coming and digitized their entire supply chains. They aligned with international climate protocols. They built systems of trust. And now, the world is responding by writing them into contracts once reserved for America. If the U.S. fails to act fast, with bold investment, unified digital reform, and geopolitical predictability, it risks cementing these losses for a generation. This isn't just about feeding nations. It's about sustaining the economic lifeblood of the Midwest. It's about keeping small towns alive, preserving agricultural research, and protecting the ripple effects that touch every corner of the U.S. economy. The message from global buyers could not be clearer. We don't need the cheapest wheat. We need the most reliable partner. That single sentence may very well decide the future of American agriculture. So now, the choice is Washington's to make. Rebuild the systems, restore the trust, or keep watching as the world quietly walks away, contract by contract, shipment by shipment, season by season. Let us know in the comments, is this just a bump in the road, or are we witnessing a permanent shift in the global grain order? And if you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for more deep, global stories that matter. Your support helps keep these insights coming.